thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. We've had a very ambitious day of BuzzBooks official day, and it's been so much fun. We have been having fun talking to authors all day. We have a huge amount of stuff going on in social media, on Substack. We are also very grateful to our partners, the American Bookseller Association, for partnering with us on this. So let's get going. So what's new with BuzzBooks? As I said, our theme is discover and discover and discover, because that is what BuzzBooks is all about. I have already heard that we have scores of great reviews on NetGalley. I didn't even, because we were having some technological difficulty, I didn't have time to go in and look, but I hear they are, and I hope you all download your edition and put your own reviews in as well. We also have so much new stuff going on Instagram, on Substack. We hope you join us both there. And here is our new edition and its beautiful cover, which you can get through NetGalley, which most of you probably know that if you join NetGalley, you can also get the edition that has the publisher's plans in it, or you can get it for free from anywhere you get your ebooks, pretty much. And then here is we have been revealing all day basically, but I have 3 slides that show all of the unbelievably great books that are collected in this edition. And what I love is when you see these slides, look how incredible and colorful this is and how many great books we have here. So I'm just going to do that one more time just for fun. Okay. Next. This is where I'm going to pass it over to Leigh.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us I'm coming into you from Greenland. No, bad joke. But first off, thanks to Publishers Marketplace and especially Michael, Marianne, and Molly for hosting BuzzBooks and keeping us away from breaking news for at least an hour and a half. I just wanted to say that in this time, which is for many of us a very dark time, I just love the fact that we're still celebrating books, and in this case, fiction, which does so much to stoke our imaginations, feed our sense of vitality, and give us empathy and also admiration and awe at how these brilliant writers craft their projects. It's great that we have this showcase and that at least those of us who are still in the cold can do it, stay inside and celebrate. So first up is John of John by Douglas Stuart. I have to say I laughed out loud in a good way reading Grove Atlantic's VP and executive editor Peter Blackstone's galley letter. He wrote that I feel so lucky to have been able to publish Shuggie Bain, which was rather easy as I was the only bidder on the book. Peter's decision to acquire the book turns out to have been brilliant and prescient, as the book went on in 2020 to win the Booker and the Sue Kaufman Prize and to become a New York Times bestseller. Young Mungo was also widely acclaimed. I loved it. I'm sure many of you did as well. And this latest work, John of John, is nothing short of magnificent. The first sentence, her feet were as purple as calf liver, is irresistible to me. And I actually like liver. And from there, it's unputdownable. It's just a work of art. So welcome to you both, Peter and Douglas, and please come to the virtual stage.
Thanks so much, Leigh, for that wonderful intro. Douglas, I can see you.
I can see you too.
Great. Magnificent is a great word. That's not one I use very often in my copy because you have to keep it for the very best things. But this book is one of those very best things. And sometimes when literary agents ask me what I'm looking for, it's hard to answer that question. But I sometimes say, oh, I just want a literary masterpiece. And that's what I found with Shuggie Bain. And then this book is even more special, beautiful, brilliant in its exploration of its form, in its aesthetics, and in the way that it explores its astonishing characters. So Douglas, it's been so wonderful to work with you on now our third book. And can you talk a bit about John of John and about the characters that are central to the novel?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for having me tonight, everybody. And I suppose that first sentence in the book about her feet are as purple as calf liver is quite a way to start, but it does have a point and it comes good. But yeah, the heart of the novel is the MacLeod family, and there's really three of them. Our protagonist, Cal, is 23, and feels like a failure after recently graduating from art school. He grew up on a very sort of distant island in Scotland, and one day he gets a call from his father, John, who asks that he comes home to take care of his grandmother, Ella. Now, Ella is not John's mother, it's his mother-in-law, and so Cal feels this huge sense of duty and returns to the islands for that. John is really one of the central characters in the book, and he is a weaver by trade, but he's also a deacon in the local Calvinist church and a sheep farmer. And as the three sort of family members are in this house, it's a very sort of claustrophobic living environment, but they love each other very deeply and yet keep secrets from one another. They know each other, but they don't quite know each other fully. And I always start with characters. I think, Peter, I write to try and understand people better. And even for me as a writer, the joy is also meeting the characters in the way I hope a reader would come to meet them. And so really creating these characters was the greatest pleasure for me. I think a lot of it stems from my lonely youth, wanting to imagine other worlds. And I've heard writers say like they feel like a god, that they have all these characters and they're playing with that. But I often feel like a boy with a bag full of dollies or a box full of dolls, and I get to play with them and make them do what I want them to do. But the book is about secrets, and these characters, although they love each other as a family, it's about things that are unsaid. And for me, it was how family can know you sort of deepest and clearest, and yet there are still things you withhold from the people that know you the best. And I think that's true for all of us, but I think it's especially true for queer people. And so I just wanted to write about this trio at the edge of the sea who work and love and eat and pray together and really love each other to the point of great sacrifice, and yet might not know each other as well as they think they do.
No, I think that's one of the major achievements of the book is that you understand these people and you get to know them as if they're people that you've met in real life and you spent all these decades with, really. And it's extraordinary how you bring that all to life. But it was in some ways, it's a bit of a departure from your first two books, which I'll flash up. I mean, in case people don't know what they look like, but Shuggy Bane, that's our beautiful edition of Shuggy Bane, and then Young Mungo, and then John of John, you saw the little image, but this is the real Galley, and it's a special feeling book. But yeah, this is a bit of a departure after Shuggy and Young Mungo, including in terms of the setting. So could you talk a little bit about what drew you away from Glasgow and to the Isle of Harris and the Outer Hebrides?
Yeah. I've always loved the Outer Hebrides, and for anybody that doesn't know it, it's the archipelago of islands that are up in the the northwest of Scotland. Sort of the last thing you encounter before you would get to Greenland, to keep it very topical. It's about 3 hours from the mainland of Scotland, and so it can feel quite distant. And because it feels very distant, it can often be shrouded in like mystery and myth. It's not very populated, and it holds a very special place in the imagination. It's a totally unique culture with unique traditions, and as a writer, I couldn't help but be fascinated by it. But it's also home of many things that are under threat. It's the home of Scottish Gaelic, which is a language that only about 1% of the population speak. It's the last stronghold of a very stern, devout Calvinist faith. And it's the home of Harris Tweed, which the weavers all make in their homes and make by hand. And so how could I almost not be inspired? But I don't know. I think after writing two novels that were set in a city, I realized that I couldn't really claim to be writing about what it meant to be queer and working class and Scottish unless I turned my attention towards somewhere that was rural. And although my sort of novels aren't a trilogy, there's a little bit of an interlinking, and I hope that they form this sort of rich tapestry. But one of the things I'd wanted to get out of it as a writer was to change the pace and the tone. And when you go to a rural place, there is a different sort of rhythm. There's the rhythm that's tied to the seasons and sheep rearing and the elements. But there's also the sort of the rhythm of the heritage and how generations pass houses and reputations and everything else on one to the other. And that affects everything. It even affects gossip and casual talk. And it was a lovely thing to slow down and find myself with the rhythm of the islands.
No, it's an absolutely beautiful rhythm that you bring, and it's a surprising place. I think you may have some idea about the Outer Hebrides and what the beaches look like. And as Douglas describes them, you'll see that these incredible white sand beaches, which just aren't the sort of rocky things that you might expect. And the Gaelic is wonderful. You'll learn just a little bit of Gaelic as you read this book, because Douglas has interspersed that actually in a very kind of essential way. This novel is so beautifully written, but I think it's totally accessible to any reader of literary fiction. I think it's actually a great place to start with your work. If you haven't read Shuggie or Young Mungo, read John of John. But I found myself welling up and just really feeling emotionally wrought when I was editing the book, even in the second time, because there's so much that you write so powerfully about love, which is a huge theme of your first two novels, maybe the major theme. There's filial love, fatherly love, even religious love, unrequited love. Is love the core theme of your fiction? Could you talk a little bit about how you try to explore love in your fiction?
Yeah, I think people think I write about very dark social things, but I think I put them in my fiction because I'm trying to test the love at the heart of it. It is about seeing what that love is worth and what it can hold. And I think as someone who lost his parents very young and then who grew up queer and so internalized a lot of feelings of being unworthy and unlovable, I am like fascinated by love, but I do find in my writing that I need to stress it or I need to test the weight of it, as I said. And certainly in this novel, I think that like caring for someone when they're in need is like the supreme act of love. We can say we love someone, but unless we're willing to care for them when they're going through a tough time, I'm not sure what that love is. And that's filial and parental in this book. And Cal in the novel is called home to take care of his ailing grandmother, and he sidelines his own future in order to do that. And he doesn't think twice. But once he's home, he's realized she's not as ill as his father said. And so he's been called home for very different reasons. And that sort of takes us into hopefully a layered story about duty and patience and obligations and the small sacrifices that families make for one another.
And it's such a wonderful ensemble piece, the whole community you get to know around these three central characters and the core families. But we're at a really fun time for all of the panelists on this program, I think, where we're awaiting that publication and we're getting, this is a wonderful thing to be part of all together. But we've got some great reactions from blurbers. Anne Patchett has weighed in with a wonderful blurb, Lauren Groff, Abraham Verghese, Minjin Lee. So it's been really wonderful to see these early reactions. And one bookseller gave this quote, which I can't resist quoting, who says, "Incredible. Douglas Stuart is out here on the Outer Hebrides restoring our faith in the 21st century novel. This is an early candidate for the best of 2026. So those of you booksellers on this team, I saw a couple of names I recognize. I know you'll take that seriously. That's from Steve Iwanski from Charter Books in Newport, Rhode Island. So it's, I think we're coming up to time, but how are you feeling about this stage and the hopes for publication?
Yeah, I'm so grateful for that response. I don't know if you knew, Peter, but I was once told by a psychic that I would die in a horrible accident in Rhode Island. So Steve wants a kiss.
Oh,
for
no.
that. I have to come to
So you're not going to go for
not gonna, yeah.
No.
But yeah, I'm excited about pre-publication. This is the first book that I've written in my entirety since winning the Booker. And I think if my books have seemed a little sad and social in the past, I think this is a good place to start. I was trying to write my most empathetic work and my biggest hearted book, and hopefully I've achieved that. So I'm excited for what comes.
I would like to say you have achieved it. It's just a remarkable book. And yeah, the love on every front is very visceral and the language is so beautiful. And what's really wonderful about this program is we get to see the rapport between the editor and the author, which is so lovely. So thank you, Peter. Thank you, Douglas. And
Really.
everybody should read this book. It's just amazing. Okay, next up is Impostor by L.J. Ross, Louise, and her editor, Anna Michels, who is Source Books and Poison Pen Press senior editorial director. L.J.'s thrillers have sold more than 11 million copies in the UK, second only to the Jack Reacher series. And if she's a name you don't know, you will very soon. Now Poison Press will introduce American readers to L.J. Ross's gripping brand of thriller writing with Impostor, which is coming out on February 3rd. It's the first in a series following criminal profiler Alexander Gregory, and just the beginning of a massive deal between Ross and Source Books, encompassing 49 new and previously published titles. Set in the remote hills of Western Ireland. Are we detecting a theme here? Criminal profiling psychologist Gregory is brought in to find a brutal killer who's shaken the locals to their core. This book is so good. I'm hoping Anna will ask Louise, however, why there are so many murders in these remote Irish and English villages and figure it out. Okay, over to you.
Thanks, Leigh. Hi,
Hello.
Louise. Hello,
Hi.
everybody.
Hello,
Leigh,
everyone.
thanks for that great introduction, Leigh. And it is a question that I think all mystery and thriller readers have to just come to terms with and be willing to suspend their disbelief that so many people are turning up dead in these small rural villages over and over again, because otherwise we couldn't have the wonderful series that we love so much.
I don't know. I think the countryside, they're the worst.
All those rural folks hiding out, for those who don't know, LJ. Louise lives in a little bit of a rural area herself, so.
That's what I mean.
As Leigh mentioned, Imposter is the first book in the Dr. Alexander Gregory series, which has been out for quite a while in the UK, but we have this really exciting and slightly unusual opportunity to bring an entire body of work to the US for the first time, which is just such a cool opportunity. Louise, if you wouldn't mind, could you tell us a little bit more about our protagonist, Dr. Gregory, as we're meeting him for the first time in this book?
With pleasure, yes. So as you say, it's funny casting my mind back, but it's actually been a really nice journey of rediscovery whenever I talk about him, because I do go right back to the start, which is fantastic for a writer. I think sometimes it's easy to not look back and always look forward. But with Gregory, he's an enigmatic character. I wanted him to be someone who, unlike some of the other characters I've written, where their journey feels fairly mapped out, I wanted him to be one of these characters for whom you never really have an idea whether he has too much darkness to him, whether he could sometimes go off the beaten track or not. And that kind of unnerving quality is something that I wanted to maintain in the reader's mind as you go through the journey with him. So he essentially is someone who's had a dark kind of past you don't really know about, and I won't spoil it for anybody. But he brings to the table a real mixed bag of human emotions that he's still trying to figure out himself. And the way that he chooses to do that is by trying to help others, which is a laudable goal. So he works as a clinical psychologist by day in a maximum security facility in the UK. So just outside of London, I'm sure many people would still have heard of Broadmoor. It's infamous. In my novels, it's Southmoor, just to preserve that distinction. But it's this Victorian edifice, which is very daunting from the outside, but actually from the interior, through his eyes and those of his colleagues, you see it as a place where it's a really well-run facility. It's full of talented clinicians, and he's one of them. And he's there to help people. And he has a sort of a roster of regular people who he works with and tries to understand whilst helping them. So that's one side to the story that's running through. He's also a bit disappointed because off the pages, we learn that he and one of his greatest mentors, one of the doyens in the industry, Professor Douglas, had set up this criminal profiling unit in the UK, which unfortunately, having done really well, suffered a huge fallout following a particular case. Again, which I won't spoil for anybody, but that led to the huge disappointment of that criminal profiling unit being disbanded. And so at the start of this novel, you have someone who is trying to rebuild their reputation, but also feeling a bit nervous about going forwards and putting himself out on a limb. Well, that opportunity comes when he gets a call from a very remote village in Western Ireland where the police over there, or rather the Garda, are really struggling to get a handle on a really heinous crime in their little community. They really don't want to have to go outside and ask for help. And it's only really the fact of these two having such a fantastic reputation as being people who can take a macro view, not mind read as such, but use their skills, use their experience, and really be able to uniquely step into the psychology of the kind of killer that they're looking for. And so he takes a risk and dives in. And that's Gregory.
And he is one of those characters that once you finish the first book, you've learned more about him, but you certainly haven't learned everything. And so you have to keep reading and keep going to follow his story. I will say that when I first read Imposter, it really reminded me in a lot of ways, including some of the setting and the Irish culture of Tana French's novels, which I am a huge Tana French fan, and I suspect that many folks on the call are as well. So if everyone else is out of Tana French books to read as I am, then this would be a great place to start to get some more of that kind of thing.
Great.
And Louise, in your previous life, you were a lawyer before you were a writer. And I'm curious, given your subject matter, how has that background informed your writing?
You know what's funny? People often say two things to me. They say, how do you write so prolifically? Which is true. I've written quite a lot in 10 years, but I tend to always say that in my former life, I was writing easily 10,000 words a day. I was in the habit of writing. If I ever get carpal tunnel, that'll be the reason. It'll be my former life. I blame everything on the legal world now. So that was the kind of habit I was in. So then when I made the shift, actually writing every day and sitting and focusing on writing creatively didn't come as such a shock to the system as it might do otherwise. But another thing a lot of readers say is normally when they read my novels and a storyline will pop up that actually is loosely based on something that I might have experienced in my former life, they're always, without a doubt, the ones that readers say, that just would never happen. And that is truth being stranger than fiction. So yeah, it's so funny. The things that you see and the things that I came across, absolutely loads of inspiration for the characters that I now write. And it's even surprising to me how much I must have taken in during those 10, 12 years when I worked as a lawyer, because you don't realize you're doing it. But I guess as a writer, and I guess just as ordinary people, we are observant of others and like sponges as we go through the world. And I guess as a writer, you don't even realize it's somewhere locked in the back of your mind and it just pulls out.
Absolutely. And I think that you can see that sort of very keen observation of character coming through in the novel. With each character, obviously, Dr. Gregory is well drawn, but you really start to feel like by the end of the novel, these folks, this town, you can really feel all the dynamics come together. And I think that some of that must be drawn back to all of the different people that you interacted with in that career as well. So that really brings it to life. I know that we're here to talk about Imposter, but one other really interesting thing about your career is that you write different series for quite different audiences. And so I'm curious, when you were writing Imposter and embarking on this series, how were you thinking about the intended reader, or who are you visualizing in your head as you're really digging into a book?
As you say, before I started this career, as you said, I was a lawyer. I was working long days in the City of London, and I would be sitting on the tube or wherever going home, and I just wanted to fall into a story. And if you're dealing with heavy subject matter daily, as readers, we don't always want something that is too heavy. Sometimes you just want something you can fall into. And if you're really tired or even physically tired with your eyes, you want to be able to pick it up quite easily without having to, with tired eyes, remind yourself, oh gosh, where was I again yesterday? So I wanted to, first off, when I started writing, which was my first series, the DCI Ryan series, which is basically, I would say, a broad kind of net. It's regional crime fiction in the northeast of England, but it's all very much atmospheric, mystery, strong sense of place, castles. It's where I grew up, so I love that area. And so that really comes through on the pages. So as far as then writing something that readers would enjoy and be able to fall into, that's a wide net. But then with Gregory, it was a bit of a challenge to myself originally to then start writing a second series. And I think what drove me to that was first and foremost my own interest in psychology. What I didn't mention before is that my mom is a clinical psychologist as well. So I grew up with that kind of discussion in the household. And I also did a postgraduate degree in psychology myself in Oxford when I was expecting my son. Long story. Some people just watch TV when they're pregnant. I wanted to distract myself so they would keep busy. But that came in useful. And so what drove me to start writing this was really to try to challenge myself to take some of those themes that I'd read about and try to infuse it and create a sense of understanding for the perpetrator, not necessarily forgiveness or exculpation, but a sense of the whole person. Because I think certainly over here in the UK, I don't know what it's like in the US, but in the UK, there can be a strong kind of populist movement towards retribution and punishment and just lock them away no matter what the crime, big or small. And in terms of the work that I did, even as a student, when I worked as a researcher for the professor at law school, the facts, the data didn't back up any idea of that helping recidivism rates. People would just still be going back to prison. They're not learning anything through that. So all these years later, when I was writing this character, I wanted to show somebody who, yes, wanted to make the streets safer by finding these people, but also try to help them not to do it again. And if that wasn't possible, at least to help the victims in understanding that this was a disordered mind. And although they looked like us, they're not like us. So that was
such a unifying theme is fiction writers' empathy.
Yeah.
Searching for the connection among people. It's a universal theme. And it's actually scientifically proven that people who read fiction grow their empathy. So
absolutely.
Anyway, I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from LJ Ross. And thank you, Anna. Thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Amazing talk. Thank you so much. All right, next up, we have 200 Monas. This is a little shift of gears by Jan Saenz. This is her debut novel. PW calls it darkly funny, and Kirkus says it's a wild, fun, and moving page-turner. Saenz Little Brown senior editor Gabriella Mongelli will join Saenz in conversation. The promo line on the back of the galley here says it all. Protagonist R.V. Keening has 48 hours to sell her dead mother's surprise stash of rare pills. In other words, Monas, or suffer the consequences. And then it just goes like off the hook from there in a very good way. I've dipped into this novel. I've read a lot of it. I'm almost finished. I'm going to finish it tonight. And wow, it's hilarious, strange, poignant. The author's got a wonderfully fresh voice. Saenz is an author, poet, and educator who lives near Houston. 200 Monas comes out in March. Over to you.
Thank you, Leigh, for that wonderful introduction. Definitely, we're going to get into what Monas and what they are, but I also just want to say thank you to everyone who joined us here tonight. It is freezing in New York, but I'm super excited to be inside, cozy, and talking about a book that is certain to heat everyone right back up. Jan, hello, my friend.
Hey.
I'm so excited to chat. Before we dive into it, I know Leigh gave a great teaser of what Monas is about, but I thought it'd be helpful for the viewers to add a little bit more context. Essentially, 200 Monas is this incredible story where right when we open, we meet RV, a college senior in the middle of finals week, already a stressful time, but she's also mourning the recent death of her mother. And as RV is packing up her childhood home, she finds this mysterious bag of pills in her mom's closet, only for those two larger-than-life drug dealers to come knocking on her door. To make matters worse, the pills aren't any regular drug, but Mona, I will spoil it for everyone. It is a rare pharmaceutical, a fictional one that, bear with me, induces intense orgasm. So RV has 48 hours now to sell the drugs, make $10,000 or else. So to aid in her quest, she recruits bad boy drug dealer Wolf. The two set off on a race against the clock. And this is truly the most hysterical, horniest, and shockingly heartfelt book I've experienced in ages. I love it so much. Jan, you've written something that you need to read to believe in the very best way. And I'd love to just introduce you to the world. This is your debut. And just, I'd love to hear what inspired you to write 200 Monas and how RV and this little pill that could came to be.
Yes, I'd love to. And BuzzBooks, thank you so much for having me. The inspiration was really, like many writers, it's a combination of what you got going on personally and also what you're reading. You know, on a personal level, I had lost my father to cancer when I was 16. And I remember feeling very freakish because my grief journey did not look like what I was seeing on movies. Like, I wasn't crying. I remember finding myself very easily distracted by school and extracurriculars. And I kept forgetting that I had actually lost my father. And I think I carried a lot of shame from that. And because I don't know, it just seemed like I wasn't grieving properly, or what I thought that properly should be, what correct grieving looked like. And so years later, my mother had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. And I found myself in that exact same place where I was not processing sort of the magnitude of the situation. And anytime I would try to sit in my feelings, it just felt like a fog or like a block, like I really couldn't reach what I knew I was feeling. And again, just that sort of shame or what is wrong with me? Am I a freak? And then this idea for Mona came up this one night. Again, my mother was going through a lot of treatment. And so Mona is a drug that makes you orgasm. And this one night I was in bed with my husband, and this is not going like where you think it is, but like I was in bed with my husband and he was talking about his day and just talking and talking. I was in a really weird state of mind. And he had just mentioned something very small about my mother. And just like a trigger, I just remember, and I burst into tears in the most violent, visceral way. And I was convulsing. It really did feel truly like a bodily function wreaking havoc on the system. And something about that moment felt like orgasmic. It felt like this sort of huge buildup of something you're holding on to, and you release, and your body is crossing this bridge with or without you. And it really made me realize that I'm always grieving, but the body is brilliant, and the body stores or hides grief or trauma in a way without us even knowing. We think we're okay, and the body's no. And so that's where sort of Mona came from, is this sort of, I'm going to make you feel something whether you want to or not. But yeah, and just by coincidence, I was like thinking a lot about the female orgasm and why the hell a drug like this did not exist. But that's not, we only have like 3 minutes, so
conversation for another day.
Yes.
No, but I completely hear you. And I love what you say about how like you felt your grief journey didn't look like you expected it. And I feel in so many forms of media, we're told this certain type of story archetype. Books about grief should be serious and somber. Novels with a romantic arc are often dismissed as light and breezy, but that is absolutely not true. We have decades of literature and film and canon that prove that's not true. But I feel like 200 Monas is such a great example of this playing against type and playing against expectation. It's a grief book wrapped in a hot pink explosion of feelings and action. And when you were writing, I'd love to hear, like, how did you find yourself pushing against this kind of category boundary?
Yeah, I think I love books that defy genre. And I think pushing against the boundaries of genre has everything to do with really being honest with yourself about what you like and whether or not those likes even go together. I compare it to, if you're like a thrift shopper, you know what I'm talking about? You'll see a piece of furniture that you really love and it doesn't go with anything. But if you do that enough and you trust the process, eventually your home will be made up of all of these different elements that collectively make up your unique taste. And that's what writing the book felt, is trusting the process, that if I lifted all of these elements from different genres that I really love, I would come up with something that was interesting. I wanted like the tender coming of age story and the sweet book boyfriend, but I also wanted like transgressive fiction and the unhinged psychopath and these raunchy conversations about sex and secret societies. And the book really draws a lot of inspiration from Coen Brothers films or early Kevin Smith films, The Big Lebowski and Dogma. And I think what makes those films so fun to watch is the eclectic quality of the characters and the pit stops. And I wanted the book to feel like that. And so yeah, I think the trick is pull from all sides of the sphere, whether it's the news or magical realism or camp. And if you fuse those together in a way that is in conversation with the subconscious or whatever you got going on personally, it will create an interesting home that you want to live in for as long as it takes to finish the novel.
No, absolutely. And even internally, we've been talking a lot about how this book feels like uncut gems if written by Phoebe Waller-Bridge. 2 things that should not work together. And then you're like, wait, yes, absolutely. And there's so many ways into this novel. But most importantly, as you said, it's one fast-paced read. There's a ticking clock, a singular goal. Arby needs to get that money. She needs to survive this adventure. And when meshing all that together, how did you find yourself managing to weave it all into something that's not only propulsive, but also incredibly cohesive?
Yeah, it covers a lot of ground. And I think for me, I think dialogue does a lot of that work of the connective tissue or just pushing you through the novel. It's very dialogue heavy. And those conversations are super bouncy. There's all this sexy banter with Arby and Wolf. And you just find yourself investing in those forward moving conversations. It almost feels like the lubricant of the like engine that sort of connects everything or takes you from one place to another. And when I edit, I do edit by ear. I do take time to, my husband, he's such a trooper. He'll like sit on the couch and it's kind of like we're doing a table read and I'll just listen to the rhythm of those conversations or the punctuation, the prose, or how we're hitting a comedic beat next to a dramatic beat. And I think it is that sort of meticulous attention to your attention span or to this sort of musicality or rhythms of how we're going through this story. And yeah, and I think at the time too, like I love flash fiction. I was reading so much flash, and I feel like flash fiction did so much for my writing. So yeah, I think in many ways you can tell that the novel is written by someone who really appreciates storytelling, that it satisfies you by unfolding and progressing in a very quick way.
No, absolutely. And even there's a punchy quality to it. And I'll never forget, there were times we were talking about edits, or even I think we were into copy edits, and we'd call each other and be like, okay, let's read this out loud, or
Yeah.
make sure it's hitting the way we want to hit it. And it leads to an incredibly satisfying read, pun very much intended.
Yeah.
And so hopefully, fingers crossed, we have time for just one last short question. I do always just want to shout this out. This is your debut novel. You're no stranger to writing, but I'd love I know there's often a lot of aspiring writers or fellow authors on these calls, and just for you to share what the process has been like for you, what's been exciting or surprising about the publication experience, me calling you about copy edits included.
Yeah, I do think I've had a unique debut experience. Like after the book was acquired by a publisher, the film rights were purchased, and I think I was just really surprised and shocked by how quickly people were interested or excited or really invested in this novel or what it meant to them. And I don't know why that surprised me so much. There's so many authors who their work means something to me, or I fangirl like crazy. But I guess I think for so long, I just got used to you're a writer. You get used to going unnoticed. You chalk it up to
Tell us about
bad
your
luck
film
or-
deal.
Oh, I can't really say a lot. I can tell you that it's with Imagine Entertainment and Amazon MGM, and just an incredible team who's really passionate about the book. And I'm screenwriting. I feel very lucky. That's been an incredible process, but I can't say much.
So from poet to screenwriter.
Thank you.
We're at the halfway mark of our program. And next up is, and it's on your screen, I'm finally going to show an actual book, which I should have been doing all along, The Missed Connection by Tia Williams. So it's coming out in June, on June 16th, I think, from Brand Central. Our heroine in this book, Sasha Cruz, is a casting agent who doesn't do relationships until she meets a mysterious stranger on a flight. I don't know if that's ever happened to me, but maybe that's because I try to bury my nose in a book. But they part before the two can exchange contact info, which I almost said phone number, but I guess that's not done anymore either. Don't you love a Catch Me If You Can romance? Which I do. Tia is, or rom-com, not romance. Tia is also the New York Times bestselling author of 7 Days in June, which is a Reese pick, and The Perfect Find, which is now a Netflix film starring Gabriella Union. Her NAACP Image Award nominated bestseller, A Love Song for Ricky Wilde, was named one of the year's best romances by the New York Times and Amazon. Kara Kosztolnyik is VP Editorial Director at Grand Central Publishing, overseeing the fiction program, and is editor of this book. Really exciting. And one more time, The Missing Connection. So come up to the stage.
Thank you so much, Leigh. Tia.
Hi.
It's great to see you. I'm so excited to talk to you about this novel. It is fantastic. And Leigh, thank you so much for that introduction for it. Every time I tell people about the pitch for this novel, they always say, I need to read this book right now. And one of the things that she doesn't mention in that pitch is, and that I think is also just so great about it, is that the fact that they meet on this plane, they don't exchange contact information. And so she goes, and here's some person who never takes risks. She knows exactly what she wants to do in her life with this character, Sasha. And then she goes and emails her best friend, or thinks she emails her best friend to help her track this guy down. And then she ends up accidentally emailing the entire global company that she's trying to find this guy. And that kind of sends her into a tailspin, no pun intended. And
Haven't we all
then
been there?
right? And then she ends up hiring this private investigator to make things even more complicated in her life. So it's just such a delicious premise. And I'd love to know what inspired you to come up with this awesome story idea?
Thank you for that introduction. So I was struggling for what to write next after Ricky Wilde. I was like, what? My first 3 or 4 books were all taken from a kernel of my personal love story love life. And after a while, you run out of personalities, like you run out of anecdotes to make a book out of. And I really had to have to come up with something totally from scratch. And my friend out of the clear blue texted me and was like, something crazy just happened at my job. And I think this might be your next book. And so something very similar happened. This woman totally fell in love with the guy she was sitting next to on the plane. And she wasn't sure if he worked for her company or not. And so she emailed HR and accidentally emailed the whole global company. And then people all over the world were looking for this guy for her. So that's where the idea came from.
It's so good. I imagine you must have done some really fun research for this novel just to write it. And was there anything like fun or thought-provoking that came up in your research when you were writing this? And no spoilers if you can't help it.
Yeah, a ton. I found out a lot of interesting things. So first of all, this is like a very different novel than I've ever written. I'm a romance author, but each time I try to like dip my toe into a different aspect of romance. Last time with A Love Sign for Ricky Wilde, I sprinkled in some magical realism. Before that, I had some with 7 Days in June. I had some social realism in there. And this time I wanted to do like a straight up Catch Me If You Can romp, like just a summer romp. And so I have this sort of detective story in the middle of it because she's trying obviously to chase down this guy she sat next to and decided she was in love with. So she hires a detective and they try to find him, as people all over the world are looking for him too. And what I don't know how to do is write a detective story. So I interviewed a few big deal detectives who work with high profile clients. And so I got to learn a lot about human nature, a lot about how am I going to talk about this without spoilers? The secrets that people keep that live among us that you would never suspect. Also, my main character, Sasha, is a high functioning goofball, which is an aspect that I have very intimate knowledge of because I too am a high functioning goofball and have been attracted to so many of those kind of characters, like from movies and TV. Growing up, I loved Diane from Cheers. I loved Whitley Gilbert on A Different World. I loved Goldie Hawn and Private Benjamin. I loved these women that are obviously very intelligent, but don't take themselves seriously and fumble a lot or have like a quirky eccentricity to them. And Sasha, one of the things she's really into is obscure history podcasts. And so, as am I. And she was listening to a podcast about the history of neurology and found out that your brain always sees your nose, but it filters it out so that you're able to take in other information and you're not overstimulated all the time by seeing your nose. And I found that quote, and then I felt like it's also a theme of the book too, that there's something that's right before her, in front of her, that she never really realizes is a part of her without spoiling too much.
Yeah.
So that's something that I really loved.
I love that so much. And I think that Sasha's going to be the next high functioning goofball out there that people are going to say that they love and adore because she's a character. I think accidentally emailing your entire company is probably everyone's worst nightmare, but you do come up with this great spin on adding some interstitials that are included in the novel. Can you get into that a little bit more?
Yeah. So what happens is Sasha is she's at LaGuardia on her way to an international brand summit for this company she just started working for. But she has anxiety. And so she is just like nervous and has nervous energy. And to kill time, she goes to one of those mini airport spas. She gets a manicure, and the manicurist says, "You seem uptight. Maybe would you like me to read your palm? Because I'm studying palmistry." And Sasha's, "You know what? Have at it." And she reads that Sasha has an unexpected chance encounter about to happen to her that's going to change hearts and minds all over the world. Sasha ends up meeting the man on the plane, and he's Italian, and she thinks that's what it means, hearts and minds all over the world. She's from here, he's from Italy. But what happens is it starts to become clear as these people all over the world are searching for this guy for her. As they're searching for the guy, they're finding love themselves. And so the manicurist / palmist predicted that Sasha's chance encounter has this domino effect throughout the world. And so in the interstitial chapters, you get a peek into what's happening in different cities around the world as people are looking for him.
I love that. It's so great. I feel like this novel is a romance novel that's really cementing you in that genre. What is it about the romance readership that appeals to you? And what do you think, why do you think the romance is resonating so much in this current moment?
Is this a heated rivalry conversation? Or
we could make it that.
No, I love, okay, first of all, romance chose me. I did not choose romance. When I was at an inappropriately formative age, I want to say 9, 10, I used to be obsessed with my mom's 80s paperback romances that she would keep in a pile next to her bathtub in my parents' bathroom. They were always really fat because they had absorbed the steam
Like
from her bath.
Rosemary Rogers or?
Oh, totally. Jude Devereaux. Yeah, all of them. Catherine Woodowis.
I'm remembering.
Yeah, the biggies. And I was obsessed with them, and I would open them up and they would fall right to the sex scenes. And I was just obsessed with the heightened reality of romances. And it just ingrained itself in my DNA so deeply that my entire life, I always knew I was going to be a writer. My main career was a beauty editor at fashion magazines. But it cemented itself in my DNA so much so that when I sit down to write in any other genre, it comes out as a torrid romance. It's just who I am. And what I love about the audience is that to be in the romance genre, it has to end in a happily ever after. So I love the hope and optimism that
we need that.
Yeah. I love that it's female centered mostly. And I love that it's horny. I love that it's an escape. And we really, God knows I need it these days.
This is the second conversation in a row where we've used the word horny.
My work here is done.
The Ending Writes Itself by Evelyn Clarke. That's our next Buzz book. It's coming from Harper on April 7th. And now I'm reading from a script. It was a dark and stormy night when New York Times bestselling author V.E. Schwab proposed an absurd idea to longtime friend and screenwriter Kat Clarke that they should write a book together. V had made quite a name for herself, including the Shades of Magic series, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, totally love, and Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil, but had sworn she'd never co-write a novel. While Kat, following a tumultuous career as an editor and the author of several YA novels, including Girlhood and Entangled, had fled the publishing industry, none of us had ever thought about that, to work in even more tumultuous film industry, swearing she'd never return to books. But that night, as they switched from tea to something stronger, which we should all be doing at this point, Evelyn Clarke was born, and so was this locked room thriller that Stephen King has pronounced to be in the running for the best mystery in 2026. And he also said it's reminiscent of Agatha Christie, quote, in the best way. I'll leave you with this line from the chapter titled The Horror Writer. Quote, "The knife slides in, it parts the flesh with ease." Who knew they were talking about a tomato? Okay. Their editor is Sarah Stein, executive editor Harper.
If you were to see my marked up manuscript, all the comment bubbles would be like, huh, LOL, oh my God, because I just was so delighted by reading this book. The Ending Rights itself is set on a remote Scottish island where 7 writers whose careers have failed to launch have gathered to write the ending in the final volume of the recently deceased Arthur Fletch's mystery series. In exchange, they are promised a mind-boggling amount of money, as well as a chance to revive their careers. This is a book that feels so incredibly now in how it mashes up familiar genre tropes in order to create something that feels incredibly fresh. Yes, there is a dark and stormy night, and the characters do drop like flies, but the how and the why of it all will keep you racing through the pages. It's a high concept book with a real sense of joy. And ultimately, once you've gotten past the rapidly growing pile of dead bodies, it's a tribute to the most terrifying act of all, putting pen to paper and telling a story. I would love to talk with you, Kat and V, about how this collaboration came to be. I know you all are friends and live quite close to each other in Edinburgh. And can you tell us about the gestation of this book?
Okay, I have to go here. V and I have been friends for 15 years, and the important things you need to know are that she swore she would never co-write a book, and would never write anything without fantasy in it. And I swore that I would never return to publishing, which I left after a tumultuous career as an editor and YA writer. And yet here we are, and it's all Victoria's fault.
It is. It's always my fault. I had an idea that was neither fantasy nor something that I, to be frank, wanted to tackle by myself. I knew it had publishing trauma in it, something that Kat and I are both really well versed in. And so I showed up at her kitchen table one day and said, hey, I have a really weird idea. And at the time, Kat is still a very talented screenwriter. And I said, if I write this book, would you adapt the screenplay version of it? And Kat immediately was like, yeah, sure. Sounds like fun. You go off and write the book. And I went off and started writing, and I realized, hey, that's a lot of work. And it's way more fun if I make you do it with me. So I went back to Kat's kitchen table and I said, Kat, let's write the book together. And Kat pointed out that she had left publishing and that I did not believe in co-writing. And we both proceeded to eat our words over the next 6 months while we developed this story.
So it was better than therapy, right?
It was really handy.
So there's a lot in here about like exorcising. Is that the right way you pronounce it? Sorry. I'm not just exercising trauma, I'm exorcising trauma. But what did you find most cathartic about writing this book? How do you feel as if the book helped you think about your own writing and publishing journeys?
I'll start. Yeah, I think that it is cathartic. Publishing is a really lonely space for authors traditionally. It's one of the reasons Kat and I first bonded when we were both in YA, but it is you're attached to someone else as a life raft. And it's one of the things is because publishing is a business. Writing is an art and publishing is a business. And so often it can feel like we're isolated as creators. And that means that whatever you go through something difficult, it can feel like an indictment of you instead of the fact that the industry's hard and writing's hard and publishing's hard. And so I knew from us being friends for 15 years, we had shared a lot of our horror stories to each other over drinks at the table. But I found it a deeply cathartic act to be able to process it through these avatars of these 7 writers.
And every story in the book, every horror story that happens to these authors that they relate in the book has happened to either they or me or someone we're friends with. So yeah. It's only barely fiction.
I was going to say, it's shocking. I don't think we ended up with so many more horror stories than we could put in the book.
Yeah, we had to edit them down.
There is a sequel. And on behalf of the industry, I would like to apologize. But I also feel as if there's something very strange about publishing in which reading is this thing that is so internal. It's you and a book and your imagination and your powers of empathy. And yet we come together as a group to support that writing and to celebrate it and to bring it out into the world. And I wonder how the act of writing changed when it stopped just being you and either your pad of paper, your computer screen, however it is that you do write, and started becoming a conversation with a collaborator.
I think it was a lot less lonely. And I think the great thing about having two of you is like, when one of you is having a crisis of confidence or crisis of faith, the other one can buoy them up. But we're never both up at the same time. We're balancing each other out. And also just being able to hand off the work to each other. Like it wasn't an easy process. It didn't make it half as much work, but there was a lot more fun involved, at least for me. V, was there fun involved?
There's so much fun involved, I think. And also, it makes it a conversation. It makes it a collaboration. It doesn't make it less work, but it sure makes it less lonely. I do think there's also a very particular nuance to how Kat and I work, which is many co-authors will split along points of view. And that does maybe make it half as much work. And they say, hey, you take points of view 1, 3, 5, I'll take 2, 4, 6. That's not how Kat and I work. We really want Evelyn Clarke to have a voice. We want it to feel like one person who happens to be an amalgamation of the two of us. And so we build it like a house where we build the scaffolding and the infrastructure of it together. And then we go into each room and we build the room and decorate the room and furnish the room and kind of work over each other, sentence on sentence, so that both of us have touched everything and we don't move on until we're both really, this is the best version. And so what that means is the two of us have held hands on every single moment in the book. One of us might throw out a line of dialogue and the other one throws out a flourish of prose, but there's no point at which that scene's your problem, Kat. I don't need to worry about that.
Although I must say, when it comes to beautiful descriptions, that is V's job, because I'm just like, you're like, but what does the house look like? I'm like, it has a door. There are some windows.
This is the difference. The only difference is that I am the kind of, I know you've seen the apple test of how do you picture this apple in your mind. And I am the kind of person who has to picture it in its entirety and be able to walk through the house. And Kat, you are less that, but you are, from your screenwriting background, you are so good at these wit, like dark witticism and humor, and walking that line between the macabre and the funny is so much Kat's back. So we know
we have to appreciate, because this book is quite funny, even as you're on the edge of your seat and you're wanting to find out what happened. And you also like care about.
And you know what else? It doesn't feel like
not little stick figures running through a house, which I find sometimes a thriller can be. So we have time for one more question, and I'm gonna put you all on the spot, and I want to know, what was the biggest disagreement you had while you were writing? And how did that get resolved? And how did that make the book more? I feel like collaboration is so much about coming together and finding compromise. And you are two very strong women. So I'm curious about how that happened.
I don't get this sounds fake. This sounds fake, but I don't think we had a major disagreement in the writing.
I think it's similarly because Kat has an editorial background and I'm a very editorial writer. When there would be a moment wherein Kat would have one solve and I would have another and we wouldn't be on the same page, we found the thirds. So we never really, neither one of us had to give. It simply became, sometimes in editorial, you get a note and you're like, I agree with the note, but I don't love the execution that's being suggested to fix the note. So it became much more, I think Kat always wanted things to be funnier and I always wanted things to be darker. So there were moments that Kat actually had to fight to keep the humor, and she was always right. Like she was always right. Like I remember there's a moment in the book where Jackson calls on Alexa after the power is gone out. And I just kept being like, I don't get it. And Kat was like, you gotta keep this line in. And then by the time we got to like final edits, it's one of my favorite lines. And I just had to trust. So I think we trust each other. That's part one, is we just trust each other. We know each other's strengths. And if there's something that we're going back and forth on, like I'm thinking of the scene on the stairs before a point of view changes in the second half with the typewriter, like we go over and go up so we both feel as good about it.
The truth is, we actually arm wrestle and see who wins. And it's always me.
I'm just very strong. I'm just very strong.
You're really strong.
I would love that. Although I don't know how smart I would be if I was like, no, I just need this final line of your book to be changed. And whoever like heads or tails, it's me or you.
Yes. We can do rock, paper, scissors with you next time, Sarah. We'll do rock, paper,
That
scissors.
sounds good. I'm glad we now set up our process for book 2. I am so thrilled for this book to be in the world. I've been talking about it for over a year now, and we were keeping your name secret for a while, so it's been very fun to say what we're actually doing. And I am just so excited for everybody to read this book.
That was great. Thank you so much. And once again, the ending writes itself. And it is really, you can't even tell it's a collaboration. The collaboration is so smooth. It's really seamless. It's a beautifully written book. So thank you guys. And now I'm so excited to introduce Emma Straub, New York Times bestselling author of 6 other adult novels, among them Modern Lovers and The Vacationers. Okay, so Ann Patchett says of American fantasy, I can hardly remember the last time I read anything that brought me such pure joy. And if we don't need pure joy right now, I don't know when we will. Okay, plus the book takes place on a cruise ship, riffs on fame, aging, marriage, and middle age. A lot of slush, alcoholic drinks are consumed. Emma, you had me at hello. In conversation with Emma is her awesome editor, Sarah McGrath, editor-in-chief of Riverhead. So take it away, guys. Thank you.
Emma told me that she was writing this novel about a boy band themed cruise for middle-aged women, and I like laughed out loud. And if anybody else had said that was their plan, I would have maybe been a little bit nervous. But she trusts Emma to write something so fresh and so funny, and she just absolutely nails it. So yes, American Fantasy is the story of what happens when 3,000 middle-aged women, but one in particular, are reunited on a cruise ship with the biggest crushes of their lives, the 5 members of the 90s boy band that they all loved when they were middle schoolers. Now, I have never been on a cruise, and I somehow evaded completely the boy band fever in my own youth, but we all have our youthful obsessions. And this band works as a metaphor for all the other things that each of us have loved. And Emma really understands the sort of, on a fundamental level, that deep inside all of us, there's still that 12, 13, 14-year-old that holds the secrets of who we really are and what we really care about and dream of. And it's why when you hear a song from that era, whatever the era was when you were that age, or smell a certain cologne or discover like your old favorite t-shirt balled up in the back of your childhood bedroom closet, you're just rocketed back emotionally to a time when you cared about what you cared about, right? And nothing else mattered. And the book's premise just stands out as this like really memorable concept. And I'm just going to quote, in addition to Ann Patchett, Rainbow Rowell gave us this quote that just like nails it, which is, she calls it a delicious novel about being a grown-up girl who once loved something very much. You don't have to be a fan of something to love American fantasy, but if you've ever truly devoted yourself to a boy band or a TV show or even a series of books, you'll feel so understood by this novel. And then you'll keep reading, trying to understand yourself better. Okay, so that's my favorite thing about the book, although there are many other things worth talking about. But Emma has a great story about how she came up with it. So Emma, can you tell us how you came up with the idea for this book?
Thank you to everyone in the chat who's complimenting me on Dip, my cat. Dip lives to perform and loves an audience. And so Zooms are really perfect for Dip. Okay, so basically this book, so my last novel, This Time Tomorrow, was all about my dad dying. And that it was a transformative experience writing that book. And it was so sad and so hard. And I cried every day while I was working on it. And it was really like deeply emotionally taxing and difficult. And so after This Time Tomorrow came out, my father died that a few months later in September. And I got an ad or saw something on Facebook for the New Kids on the Block annual cruise in October, the following month. And I was so deranged. I saw it and I knew immediately what I wanted to do, but I couldn't actually go on the cruise. Number one, my father had literally just died like a month before, and I had to go to Italy to promote This Time Tomorrow, which was also, in retrospect, not a great idea because I ended up crying in front of many Italian journalists who were really worried about me. But the shorter version is that I did sign up to go the following year. And by that point, I had really worked things out and I really knew what I was doing. And it sounds strange to say that writing American fantasy and writing This Time Tomorrow, they weren't the same experiences at all, but to me, they feel like perfectly balanced with each other, where I went searching for joy and happiness after grief. In the wake of grief, I went looking for joy. And boy, oh boy, did I know where to find it.
Yeah. The interesting thing about the two books together is that This Time Tomorrow, there is literal time travel, right? And in a sort of almost a science fiction kind of way, magic. It's magic. And in this book, it's like the kind of time travel that is available to all of us.
Yeah.
That is what I love about this book. And every book that you write, I settle in to be entertained, and it is truly entertaining. But then very quickly, I realized I didn't know how much I needed this book, because you do tap in, you understand things about time and nostalgia, but also the kind of meaning behind human interactions and connections and moments. And it's been awesome for me to watch you. It just seems to come out of you so naturally. So I'm going to get back to the time thing. So one of the reasons the book touched me is not only that I do love my inner 12-year-old, but also Annie, your protagonist, not all of these things are true of me, but she's just turning 50. I definitely did that. And she has an empty nest. I'm about to do that. And she's divorced. That's not me. But anyway, why is it important that Annie is 50, whereas the character from This Time Tomorrow was turning 40? What is it about? What are you trying to capture with the age of these characters?
I think that for me, I'm 45 now, and I just, like many women I know who are, let's say, 45 to 55, I find myself deeply interested in middle age and what it is and what's happening. What's happening to our bodies, what's happening to our brains, what happens when you're starting over. At points you anticipate, right? Like having an empty nest, and at points you don't anticipate, a marriage ending. What happens? How do you deal with that? You deal with it differently than you would at 25.
Yes.
And yeah, I really wanted to explore what pleasure looks like and feels like in middle age, because I think it really is different, and your expectations are different, and the sort of permissions that you give yourself are different. I think that there's one of the things that I'm trying to figure out in how to talk about this book is that depending on who I'm talking to, I feel like I'm tailoring what I'm saying, because on the one hand, when I describe this book, I'm like, oh, it's so fun, it's so hilarious. And I think it is, but I also am dead serious. I am dead serious about how important it is to me that this woman go on this literal journey, and not just her, but all of the women. There are mostly women on this boat. I don't know. I think at this point, I've always been an enthusiast and a fan my whole life of lots of different things. But right now, I find myself taking it so serious. The idea of pleasure so seriously.
So we've reached our 7th and final title of the evening, The Take by Kelly Yang. So this is coming from Berkley on April 14th. Kelly is a force in young adult and children's literature, a #1 New York Times bestselling writer whose Front Desk series has won the Asian Pacific American Award for Literature. She emigrated to the United States at age 6 and lived in and worked with her parents in several motels, motels, before attending UC Berkeley at age 13 and graduating Harvard Law School. The Take is her first adult novel, which is amazing. Wow. It's about a young, broke Asian American writer and a veteran white Hollywood producer who offer each other a lifeline. And by the way, why that involves a series of blood transfusions, I don't know. I'll leave that to Kelly and Berkley executive editor Jen Monroe to explain.
Thanks, Leigh. Hi, Kelly. Hi, BuzzBooks.
Yes.
Do you like where I am?
I
when
do.
I'm done
I
here?
really, I do.
I tried.
Very cool.
So let's get right into it. I know we're at the end of this, but give us a sense of what The Take is about and what drew you to this story.
Yeah. Okay. So The Take is about two women who are both tired of being sidelined for their age. Ingrid Parker is in her 50s. She's a very powerful, used to be very powerful, white female Hollywood producer. She's made a lot of great movies for women, but now she's losing her relevancy. She's not getting the deals. She's not getting the movies made. And then we have Maggie, who is in her 20s, and she is a young Asian American struggling writer. She's trying really hard to work on her novel. She doesn't have any connections. She doesn't have any money. And the two of them decide to embark on this blood transfusion that Ingrid learns about from her doctor when she learns that she may or may not be getting a disease later. It's not happened yet, but there's a lot of signs in her blood, and she can she could really just not get it if she trades blood with a younger person, because then she'll age backwards. She'll de-age. But the catch is that the younger person, unfortunately, will get a little older. So she decides to offer this opportunity to someone who wants to have it for $3 million, essentially buying someone's youth. And Maggie takes her up on it. And at first, everything's really fun and incredible, and they get really mixed up in each other's lives. But then they end up taking a lot more from each other. And what drew me to the story is that I just really wanted to explore like the uncomfortableness which is where we're at right now in society, like how obsessed we all are with anti-aging and how it feels like everything is up for sale, even like human decency and how we treat each other and what we get to take from each other or what we get to take from our society and who gets to tell a story. And also what happens when the person that you're taking so much from is another woman and the lies that you have to tell to yourself about how that fits into feminism. And basically nothing is comfortable in the story. And I love that. And yeah, it's complicated.
It certainly is. And I know we've talked about this a lot, and some of this blood transfusion stuff is like on the horizon / maybe already happening with some of the very wealthy people, which is frightening. And so what sort of research did you do for the book? And did you look into actual like age reversal treatments that are happening right now? Or did you talk to people in Hollywood about ageism in the industry?
Yeah, for sure. All of that. So for me, the story started because I read an article where the scientists at Harvard have figured out that you could do this kind of thing in rats. You could hook up 2 rats and give them this weird blood transfusion, and the older rat actually ages backwards, but the younger rat, unfortunately, gets older. And I immediately thought, oh my God, they're going to do this to humans one day. And I started thinking like, that's a really interesting story. Like, what would that look like if they did it for humans? And I started writing The Take based on my own experience with being the wrong age at the wrong time pretty much my whole life. And some of what I've been through in Hollywood, just in terms of getting to tell a story, but then maybe not getting to tell it, and then having to claw for your right to be at the table, essentially, to fight for your right to tell that story. But the interesting thing is, as I was writing the story, I then read that there were guys in the tech world who were definitely who had also read that story about rats and were doing this. And they started, this is a real thing now. People are actually trying to use this to biohack and reverse their age.
Frightening. So the two women in our novel, or in your novel, are called Ingrid and Maggie, and their relationship, their psychological dance that they end up doing throughout the novel is really central to the story. And so what are you hoping readers take away from their dynamic?
Yeah, they are two badass women, and I admire them both deeply, but I'm also terrified of both of them. I really hope people recognize how they work to get what they want. Like for Ingrid, there's so much rhetoric that she uses in terms of, oh, you have to pay your dues and you have to be a team player. And this is how you prove your worth and your value. And this is how you can convince me that you're worth investing in. And she plants all this hope in Maggie's life. And she plants the hope that she can solve all her problems. And I think it's really important for us women, as women of color, to realize that's a pile of bullshit and no one is really going to save us. We have to stop hoping that someone's going to come along, whether it's another woman or a person of color, and open the door for us. They may not. That's just a very painful, hard truth to realize. And the sooner we realize that, the better off that we are, and the more that we can actually own our own narrative. And similarly for Maggie, I feel like my really big hope is that people recognize how hard it is for a young person to do this, to make it work. There's a really great line in the book which says, writing is not just a competition of who's the most talented, it's also a competition of who is the least starved. I think about this a lot because for a really long time, I wanted to be a writer. I have stories to tell, but I couldn't. I just didn't. People don't tell you that writing it's not so easy. That time is not free. Space is not free. Like the mental capacity to write, it all costs money. So if someone offered me $3 million when I was 23 for my youth, I don't know, I probably would have taken it. So I want people to talk about all that.
Excellent. And then what a note. And then the book also tackles ageism, race, and power in Hollywood head on. What made you want to explore these particular themes together?
And we have about 2 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. I'll make it really quick. So whenever I think of mind games and power plays, I just immediately think of Hollywood. So that's my personal experience. I also feel like the take is really about story. Yes, it's about aging and it's about these two women trying to hack the process. But at its heart, it's also about who gets to control the narrative here. Who's the villain, right? Is Ingrid relentless and gutsy for doing this, or is she evil and conniving? And Maggie, is she greedy and calculating and overly ambitious, or is she just smart and savvy? So it all gets wrapped up in story and how story gets told and how that impacts behavior. So that's why I wanted to look at all these issues through the lens of Hollywood.
But Kelly, I thought what's so smart about the book is, how you say about how when you're young, you're too young.
Yeah.
And then when you get older, you're irrelevant.
Yes.
So
yeah, we can never be we have maybe 3 years, we're the right age to do what we want. Yeah. And I want to say that's not true. That's not true. Look at all of us doing all the things.
I'm really grateful to both of you for this conversation and for this book. It's really revelatory take. And the galley has a really fun leaf on it that you should all check out if you get it. Thank you so much for this incredible conversation. And Buzz Books, wow.
That's it. Do these things. Download your sampler, follow us on Instagram, subscribe on Substack for free, and share the buzz and use #BuzzBooksOfficial. Also in the chat if you are interested in winning a set of galleys. So we will take a look at this all tomorrow. And thank you all for coming.